Hello, hello. Welcome to Laurent Collective Podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if it's your first time, really glad that you're here. So,
Yes, welcome.
Yeah.
We are going to talk about a topic that might be hard for Pat.
I'm not really excited about this topic, but
We have notes because I was like, we need to keep on track here with this topic. But that is the idea of breaking free from perfection, specifically in your creativity. And how can you be creative and be imperfect? And I don't struggle with this as much as Pat does. And so I'm going to lean on Pat for this a little bit. But I do in certain things, don't I? As I'm saying it out loud,
I'm thinking about when we had your photography business.
No, I was pretty
and young. Certain things that we would do within the business, or the different, I don't know, how you edited your photos, all that kind of stuff. You were pretty much a perfectionist. So
True.
Don't put me in this boat by myself.
And I am I really beat myself up. I sent an email yesterday and I misspelled something in the title of it, and I realized it. So I was like, I need to say something about that. Most people don't mention it. I was like, oh gosh. So I sent a quick email back and said, I'm so sorry about the, ignore the typo in the title. And then I spelled the person's name wrong. So whoa, that just really, because I was just going too fast. Yeah. And I think the overall thing about perfectionism and creativity, I was talking to our older son about this when we were on a walk the other day. And he's into music and composing music and stuff. And he said, sometimes the hard part for me is I feel like it's never done. And I think that can be the case in all creativity. So since you brought up the photography thing, for when I used to do that and I used to edit the photos myself, I had to give them to someone else because for me, it was I could do this. I could do more of this, Photoshop and editing and stuff like that. And you've seen those photos, you're like, gosh, someone should have stopped way sooner. This looks so edited. And I never wanted to get to that point, but I can see how people do get to that point because you just can't stop. You just keep going in it. Yeah. And then I think it loses something too when you do that. So we have some questions that we thought we would have you go through when you feel like you're stuck in perfection, but I wanted you to talk about how you get stuck in it sometimes.
Yeah.
Or all the time.
Or all the time.
I feel like I'm picking on you. I'm really not picking on you.
That's okay. I might pick back.
I know you will.
Awesome. Yeah. So
tell us how you get stuck in perfection before we go on the question. See, now you're trying to avoid.
I was going right to the notes. Sorry. I mean exactly what you just said. I get stuck in perfection in the sense of I will continue to tinker and then not finish things and go on to my next idea or next thought because I can't make it, or I can't draw it, or I can't do the thing that I want to make it perfect. So I'm just going to move on and I don't ever finish it. So that, for me, that's the thing that I continue to always push into and push or struggle with pushing past, is because if I'm not going to get it the way I thought I could do it in my head on a piece of paper or whatever I'm doing or creating or whatever, then I will just put it off to the side and start something new. And that's probably not the best thing. So I have a lot of unfinished things that probably are sitting around our house or on my iPad or whatever.
We've sold some unfinished things.
We have, yeah.
And they've gone well. And so if that tells you anything, sometimes I have to push because I see something and I'm like, this looks great. What we should, are you okay if we sell it? I was like, yeah, eventually, but I really want to do this, this, and this too. And I'm like, no. I think we should put it up like that. And some of those things have been our most popular things. Or,
a lot of times I will get it to a certain point and I'll be frustrated with the way it is because it's not the way I was wanting it or I thought I was intending it to be. And then that's a lot of times when you will be like, no, let's put that up and see what happens. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I know it's not going to do what it's not going to sell because it's not the way I wanted it to be or whatever, But it always tends to do decent or do pretty well, especially some of them do really well. So, but yeah, I think it's just one of those things that I know I can never be perfect in what I'm creating and doing, but for some darn reason, I want to make it perfect.
And I think that's okay. I mean, there's something innately in us, isn't it, about whatever you're doing. and creativity and whatever it may be. I mean, I think for a long time, I'm way over this now, but for a long time, I like wanted our house to be this like perfect like thing you saw in the magazine or on Instagram now or those kind of things.
Our house was in a magazine once.
Oh, it was in a magazine, and it was on, well, that was Instagram around yet? No, it was on a very popular home blog. I forgot about that. So our house did make it to that. And we did have children at the time. We had just had our second child when it did do that, and that was a really big deal to us and very exciting. However, just to prove that, the way that it looked perfect for those photos is things were shoved in the closets and they came back out after the photos were taken. And so that just is always, I don't know if you've ever seen people do this, and it's such a reminder of things of like, there will be this beautiful Instagram. I mean, some people I follow because I love their renovations in their house and stuff. And they'll show a picture and then they'll do a video and they'll be like this corner of this room and it's awesome, and then they scan like this, and over here is where they've thrown all the stuff to get it out of the picture. That you're like, how come our house always has random things on the shelves and like kids have put and stuff, and when I see photos no one else's does? Well, that's why. So again, people, I'm sure there are people that live like that don't have any clutter or kid stuff anywhere.
They probably have someone else that takes care of the clutter.
And that's okay. That is your thing if that is the case, but that maybe is not. That's, some people are really good at that. That is our kids. Our kids, we have a creative family, so perfection goes out the window when it comes to that. Stuff is going to be everywhere. But with that, we came up with 3 questions to ask yourself. Well, it's kind of 4 questions. But to ask yourself when you feel like you need to step out of perfection. So the first thing is just recognizing, like, when do you find yourself getting caught up in perfection? It's like, do you have a place that you can identify when you find yourself getting caught up in it the most? Or is it just
all the things? No. I mean, obviously when I'm creating something for a specific purpose, definitely... I definitely get stuck in that. Although I would say probably for the most part, it's more personal projects, more personal things that I do that I'm creating either for myself or for us as a family or whatever. I will definitely get more stuck into being a perfectionist. I think about, there's a painting that's on the other side. Actually, it used to be in the background of some of the podcasts in the past. And I think that painting probably sat on the easel for a really long time because I was always tinkering. I was always trying to make sure it was exactly the way I was hoping it to be. And that, I think I would do that a lot in the past. And more that I think about it, it was usually more personal stuff is when I usually get stuck. I think sometimes when it's a project, there is some perfection that goes into it, but I also know I have a timeline and a deadline, where a lot of times with personal stuff I don't necessarily feel the urge to have a timeline, and so that perfectionism I think steps in pretty quick.
That makes sense.
I've got the time, so let's continue to tinker and perfect it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think for me, when I feel myself getting caught up in perfection, it's honestly usually when I've compared myself to somebody. So I may have done something, written something, and then I see someone else's, and I'm like, oh, but mine's not quite like that. It shouldn't be like that. That's not me. But I often will... Yeah, or it's the next time then that I'm creating something that I'll catch myself doing that and that kind of thing. Like, I even find it, like, I love cooking and I do like to bake, but like the presentation of the food is not important to me. I could care less about that, but I do really care that it tastes good. And so like when it comes to like decorating a cake or something like that, like my food never looks like the pictures in the cookbooks or the post or, you know, the blog post or whatever it is they've done. But yet sometimes I'll be like, oh, I would like to take a picture of this, but what's the point of me taking a picture of it? I'm not a food blogger. Like, I'm not going down that route. I did take pictures of the bread I baked for a long time, but that was like a personal project. And I'm a photographer, but I do not understand food photography for some reason. I cannot like get the lighting right. Because
it's not real food probably half the time.
True.
In those photos. So.
Well, I mean, we have some friends that have done, or that are food bloggers, and they have...
There's so many tips and tricks.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the stuff they do, their whole setup, I don't have time for that. I just want to eat the food.
Yep.
And so that is something that I sometimes will catch myself and that kind of thing. And so I think the reason why it's important to ask yourself, when do you find yourself getting caught in perfection, is because you most likely are going to see a pattern in it. And then that pattern is important. for figuring out why that keeps happening.
Yep.
The second question is, what are some practical ideas to help you step past perfection? So you said a deadline is helpful for you.
Well, a deadline, definitely. I think another way at least for me creatively is trying different mediums in order to get a different type of result, because a lot of times when I step into something that I don't quite fully get or understand as far as medium goes, which for example that would be like if I'm always doing colored pencils and I step into doing a collage instead, that's something different that I know I'm not going to be fully prepared to perfect, so it'll take me some time, but yet there could be some good things in that could come out of the initial part of the process and things like that. And so trying to step into different ways of creating usually helps me do that a lot.
I mean, something for me, especially if you do this as a business, this is what I found to be helpful, because like I said with the photo editing stuff, I gave it to somebody else to do. I paid somebody to do it. Now that's if you're having a business in it and that kind of thing. So there are certain points where I could step out of the creativity. Like I actually, what I did is I came out with the look that I like. I was like, here's how I've edited this photo, and this is the style I want. I do not want it like, edited this way or that way on those extremes. This is really what I like. And I tried several different people until I could find the person that got it like straight on. I'm like, yep, that's what I want. And we went back and forth on that. And then when I went through the photos that I wanted edited, I culled them down and then sent them off. And that helped me so much, because it did take a little back and forth for a while, but then we got into such a rhythm that I got the pictures back, and rarely, there might have been one or two I needed to tweak. But that was so rare when it got to a certain point, and they looked exactly like I wanted them to do, but I knew it would have taken me so much more time to do them had I been on it, because I had this I had this personal emotional thing with them, right? I was there when I took those photographs and stuff like that, that kind of thing. And so when someone else was able to do it, they didn't look at it that way. They were like, great, these photos need to look this way, I'll make them look this way. And they were much quicker, and I was able to give the stuff to my clients so much quicker too. And so that was huge for me. Again, that isn't always an option, but that could be an option if you're doing it for a business, is to stop at one point and be able to pass it off to the next stage, if that's possible, and what you do. Question number 3 is, when you think about failing, how does it make you feel? And then how can you put a positive spin on failing? And it doesn't mean that we're saying put a positive spin on everything in life, because I can't stand that. However, failing often has a positive spin in creativity, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. I think failing always leads to an understanding of how to do it better or different, or
not at all. Sometimes.
Or not at all. Yeah, I think, I definitely think in a lot of ways, I look back at, things that we created a long time ago, or that I created a long time ago, and realizing all the steps that it took us to get to where we're at. There were a lot of scrap pieces probably thrown away or whatever, but I think understanding what didn't go quite right in that failure, it's obvious, right? We hear it all the time. Like, your failures obviously lead to your successes, because if you didn't fail in something, then you're not learning. And so, and learning to continue to get to where you want to be, right? Or wherever you want the project or thing to be. And so I feel like failure is inevitable. Like, you have to fail in order to get to where you want to be. I feel like there's rarely a person or a something that gets it right the first time. I don't know. Maybe there are, but
people might say that. I'm not
people
sure
might say
true.
It, but I think, most of the time, the things that we see, the things that we interact with, all the kind of things probably took multiple times in order for it to be where it's at. So I think just thinking of it in that way.
So I think it's asking yourself, like, how does it make you feel to fail? Most of us are going to say something negative to that question, right? That's normal, because that's part of it, right? But how, like what Pat was just saying, how can you put that positive spin in it then? Like, if I have failed, it means I'm learning. Like, that's usually the spin I put on it. Like, if I have failed, it means I'm learning, and I'll take that into the next thing that I'm doing creatively.
I mean, I think even when I'm creating stuff, a lot of times the things that I think are failures are actually leading me to the new thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, a lot of times when I'm looking at a piece of artwork or seeing something that's super inspiring to me, a lot of times it's in the imperfection that is actually the thing that's really drawing me in, than actually the perfect looking thing or whatever it is. So I think a lot of times our failures are actually the things that are the thing that helps us stand out too, and make it seem a little bit more unique and things like that. So
yeah, so I think that's good to really pay attention to that. And then when instead of beating ourselves up when we fail in creative ways, how can we then spin that? And it's good to acknowledge, like, I tried this thing and it didn't work. And then it's good to acknowledge, like, great, how am I going to use that moving forward? And like, that's a really positive way to put on it. I thought we'd go through those questions one more time. So how do you step out of perfection when you're being creative, and like, how do you break from perfection? When do you find yourself getting caught up in perfection? Pay attention to what those patterns are. Number 2, what are some practical ideas to help you step past perfection? Number 3, when you think about failing, how does it make you feel? And then how can you put a positive spin on failing? And the reason why we're putting failing, because almost the core reason for going for perfection is that you're so worried about failing in some shape or form, whatever that is. Like you said, I think that's so much, most of us, it's like because the failure is because we had in our head what something is either supposed to look like, sound like, the story was supposed to be like whatever it may be. And then when it doesn't come out that way, it's a failure because of the own stuff we put on us. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with the outside world half the time. So,
and a lot of times the outside world might look at it and go, actually, I don't see the imperfection, or like,
like I'll see with your work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That looks great. And you're like, no, what about this, and this? I'm like, I don't see that. A lot
of times, the rest of the world in a lot of ways doesn't even see that thing that maybe you view as a failure. Actually, they see it as a success.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are some questions to ask yourself when you feel like you are getting stuck in perfection, and how to embrace like imperfection and creativity, because it will take you great places. That sounds absolutely cheesy. I can't believe I just said that. Is there another way to say that?
Seems like that should be like on a cheesy poster that,
But it will.
It's like a hot air balloon.
I know. I'm sorry for maybe I took too much of a positive spin on the failing thing there. Sorry. You don't have to be that cheesy. We hope this is helpful for you guys if you are like us, and maybe that you get stuck. I'm admitting that I do too. Yeah. That you get stuck in perfection while you're creating. And it really is like, most of the things you probably see and you're drawn to are things that somebody failed, or it was their failure and you love it. And so I think keeping that in mind when you're in that, and thinking about that when you feel like you have failed at something, or it needs to go to the most perfect degree, then, and this isn't creativity. If you're building an airplane, it should be perfect, in my opinion, right? Because you want it to stay in the sky. But it took a lot of failures. But it took a lot of failures for those people to figure that out and stuff. And so there are certain things, but in creativity, I think, in lots of areas of life and stuff, we can stop the perfection thing and not have to push for it all the time. So we'd love to hear from you guys on this. You can find us on Instagram at Laurent Collective. We're also on Pinterest if you guys ever want to go over there and see us there. Laurent Collective on everything. It just makes it really simple. And we are so thankful for you guys listening. And please do send us any things and topics that you would like us to talk about. We'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, see ya.